Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
Karen, we begin with a presidential race reshaped after the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. The former president was shot during a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania on Saturday, days before he accepts the nomination at the Republican National Convention this week in Milwaukee. And now President Biden has used a rare Oval Office address to say this kind of violence cannot be normalized.
A former president was shot, an American citizen killed, while simply exercising his freedom to support the candidate of his choosing. We must not go down this road in America. We've traveled before throughout our history. Violence has never been the answer.
President Biden says Americans must resolve their differences at the ballot box, not with bullets, and he says he'll continue to draw a contrast between his vision for the country and former President Trump's. The Biden campaign has paused TV ads and canceled some events planned for today, but the president still plans to sit for an interview with NBC's Lester Holt tonight, and he'll also address Black and Latino groups in Las Vegas tomorrow.
Well, Nathan, Donald Trump says he has rewritten his Republican National Convention speech to call for unity instead of focusing on President Biden after he survived an assassination attempt. In an interview with the conservative publication The Washington Examiner, Trump said, quote, "It is a chance to bring the country together. I was given that chance."
And Karen, Bloomberg News has also learned Trump called Nikki Haley his one-time rival in the 2024 race and asked her to attend the convention in Milwaukee. We get more from Bloomberg senior writer Stephanie Baker.
Does the convention in some ways become more about policy rather than attacking the Democrats? I think that it remains to be seen how, what the tone of that convention is. Mm-hmm. Already they've invited Nikki Haley. Mm-hmm. She was not invited before the assassination attempt, and she is expected to double down on this message of unity. So I think already it's changed the tone of what looks like a very important Republican National Convention.
Bloomberg senior writer Stephanie Baker says Haley is slated to speak tomorrow.
Well, Nathan, the shooting has placed the Secret Service under harsh scrutiny. Trump allies have blasted the agency over its protection of the former president. The FBI is leading a probe into the events, which Director Christopher Wray says will be thorough.
We have committed the full force of the FBI to this investigation. An attempt to assassinate a presidential candidate can only be described as absolutely despicable and will not be tolerated in this country.
FBI Director Christopher Wray. Now the Secret Service will turn its attention to the Republican National Convention. The agency insists robust security plans are in place in coordination with local, state, and federal law enforcement ahead of the arrival of over 50,000 expected attendees in Milwaukee.
Meanwhile, back in Pennsylvania, Karen, investigators are hunting for any clues into what may have driven the suspect to try to assassinate Donald Trump. The shooter, who was taken out by Secret Service at the scene, has been identified as 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks. Kevin Rojak is the FBI special agent in charge of the Pittsburgh Bureau.
At this time, the information that we have indicates that the shooter acted alone. At present, we have not identified an ideology associated with the subject.
Special agent in charge Kevin Rojak says technical specialists are combing through all digital evidence, including Crooks' social media accounts. The FBI says he had bomb-making materials in the car he brought to the rally, but his political leanings are not immediately clear. Records show Crooks was registered as a Republican voter in Pennsylvania.
Well, Nathan, we are seeing a market reaction to the assassination attempt. The dollar now little changed. Treasuries falling as investors increase bets Trump will win the election. The moves reflect beliefs Trump will usher in looser fiscal policy and higher tariffs, which are generally viewed as likely to benefit the dollar and weaken treasuries. And shares of Trump's media company soaring in the pre-market. Trump Media and Technology shares are currently up 61%.
As for other equities, Karen, the focus is going to be back on bank earnings. They continue this morning with Goldman Sachs reporting. Allison Williams is a senior analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence.
We are expecting to see some strong trading and fee revenue from Goldman Sachs this morning. And really, the bar is even higher after some of the results that we saw on Friday. JP Morgan, who is the leader in trading and investment banking fees, reporting a gain of almost 20%. really strong equities and strength in fees across M&A, equity, and debt underwriting. We expect these same sources of revenue are going to power Goldman Sachs. And importantly, we'll be watching the market share for Goldman. The other benefit to Goldman is that they took a lot of impairment costs on their commercial real estate last year. So we feel like that has been cleaned up a bit, and we're expecting to see a much cleaner result this quarter.
Bloomberg Intelligence senior analyst Allison Williams says Goldman's report this morning will be followed by Morgan Stanley and Bank of America tomorrow.
And it's time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. And for that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. New Yorkers are reacting to the weekend attempt to assassinate former President Trump. The NYPD has increased presence in front of Trump Tower on Fifth Avenue. New York Mayor Eric Adams spoke at a news conference.
What happens when a 20-year-old reaches a point where they believe the only way to settle their political differences and disputes is to use a AR-15 or AK-47 or any other form of handgun or weapon? That sends a terrible message.
Meanwhile, New York Republican lawmakers condemn President Biden and rhetoric from Democrats for the shooting. New York State Senator Andrew Lanza.
When you convince people that someone is evil, there's going to be some maniac who wants to rid the world of evil.
Audio courtesy of ABC 7. Supporters of former President Trump gathered in front of Trump Tower, many wearing red Make America Great Again caps and draped in the American flag. The NYPD has increased security in front of Trump Tower. This was a grim weekend as we've lost several celebrities. Beverly Hills 90210 star Shannon Doherty has died. Doherty, who lost her battle with breast cancer, was 53. James Sicking of Hill Street Blues has died. His publicist says that Sicking died of complications from dementia at age 90. Fitness guru Richard Simmons has died. His publicist says Simmons died a day after his 76th birthday. And people are remembering the life and legacy of Dr. Ruth, the sex therapist and talk show host whose methods discussing intimacy made her a pioneer. Dr. Ruth Westheimer passed away in her New York City home over the weekend at the age of 96. According to new data from the World Health Organization and UNICEF, there has been some progress, but challenges achieving global immunization coverage remain. According to the WHO assessing vaccination data from over 190 countries annually, things in 2023 were pretty much the same as 2022. Dr. Ephraim Lamongo, chief of immunization at UNICEF, says they are still having areas of conflict in the world that are not recovering well.
Like the conflict in Sudan, the continued fragility in Yemen and Afghanistan is still continuing to affect children.
About 21 million children globally are still missing one or more vaccines. Global news 24 hours a day, and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg Karen.
All right, Michael Barr, thank you. It's time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update with John Stashower. John, good morning.
Thank you to the late morning start in Baltimore, and when the rookie Ben Rice hit a 3-run homer in the ninth inning, it looked like the Yanks would get a series sweep and hit the All-Star break in first place. Bottom of the ninth, the Orioles loaded the bases off Clay Holmes. Still, the game should have ended with a routine ground ball to Anthony Volpe. He bobbled it. The Yanks were still up a run with 2 outs.
A flare out to left field. Starting in is Verdugo. He has to go back. He has to go back, and he misjudged it. It is over his head, and the Orioles slide is going to end. O'Hearn is in. Rutschman is in. Mullins is your hero. The Orioles walk it off 6-5.
WBAL. Holmes now headed to tomorrow's All-Star game in Texas despite a 1-4 record and a league-leading 6 blown saves. The Mets' 5-game win streak ended. Colorado hit 6 home runs at Citi Field, 3 by Michael Toglia. The Rockies won 8-5. Phillies have the major's best record of the break. They just lost to Oakland 18-3. The A's hit 8 home runs, their most in 25 years. Lawrence Butler hit 3. Start of the MLB draft, Cleveland's got the best record in the American League. Had the first pick having won the lottery, despite having an only 2% chance. And the Guardians took Travis Bazzana from Oregon State, first time ever a second baseman drafted first overall. Big sports day in Spain. First, it was Carlos Alcaraz winning Wimbledon for the second straight year. Beat Novak Djokovic to the final both times. This one in straight sets. Alcaraz is the sixth of the Open era to win the French and Wimbledon the same year. And then Spain won the Euro soccer title for the fourth time. Late goal to top England 2-1, keeping the UK winless in major tournaments since it won the World Cup back in 1966. The Copa America final was in Miami. Wild scene before the game. Many fans stormed in without tickets. There was a delay. And then no goals until the 112th minute. Argentina scored an extra time to get by Colombia 1-0. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports, Karen Nathan.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on Sirius XM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager. After the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump, President Biden is looking to rise above the fray.
While we may disagree, we are not enemies. We're neighbors. We're friends, co-workers, citizens, and most importantly, we're fellow Americans. We must stand together.
The president took to the Oval Office with that message of unity last night, looking to revive his campaign against a Republican Party now rallying firmly behind its now wounded leader, Donald Trump. For more, we are joined by Bloomberg's Kevin Whitelaw, a veteran of Washington political coverage. Kevin, good morning. This is such a different moment in American politics. What stands out to you 48 hours after the attempt on former President Trump's life?
Well, obviously it has rewritten the race once again, but this is, of course, a race that's being rewritten almost every week in one way or another. So it's going to be a little while before we really understand the overall impact. I think that the violence was obviously shocking to everybody who watched that moment happen, and Trump's instincts for showmanship served him better than ever, with his defiant fist pump and sort of that iconic photo that you're going to see over and over and over. I think the larger question going forward is, obviously, they both have to shift their tactics a little bit in the wake of this, and that's going to potentially constrain Joe Biden's ability to sharpen and wield attacks on Trump. But obviously, Trump is also going to have to decide if he wants to try to sort of keep a message of unity or continue this in the same sort of hyper-partisan sort of attack mode that he seems most comfortable in.
Yeah, we put so much more focus now on the Republican National Convention getting underway this morning. We're also hearing reports that the former president, as you alluded to, is revamping his acceptance speech to appeal for unity, even inviting Nikki Haley to speak at the RNC tomorrow. I guess the basic question, Kevin, is how long does this pivot, these calls for unity, last? I mean, we've still got months till November.
Well, that's just it. And we do know that we know where Donald Trump's instincts usually take him. And sort of thinking back to the convention speech he gave, particularly in 2016, but even in 2020, they were pretty dark and alarmist speeches. He may well be able to pivot for a little bit, but it's a little hard to see him necessarily being able to maintain it for all the way till November. And I think in the same way, for President Biden, that ability to sort of sharpen the knife and go after Trump ultimately that's probably the only path that Biden has to re-election is turning out the anti-Trump vote. That's harder in the short term, but memories fade, and he may well be able to re-engage, particularly if Trump gives him an opening down the line.
It's been interesting as well to see President Biden out in the public spotlight even more now. We were expecting that he was going to engage further with the public just to beat back those concerns that are still lingering in the Democratic Party, I think, about the president's age and his mental fitness. I mean, he's going to be giving an interview still with Lester Holt tonight. Is that a good move, do you think, to keep up this sort of counter-programming in some way to the president or former president?
Well, essentially, he's got to find a way to stay in the spotlight, and he's got to find a way for it to not just be about the latest gaffe or senior moment. And so he's going to have to do it. But obviously, suddenly, the attention is slightly less focused on him. On some level, that may be helpful in the short term, but he still has to find ways to demonstrate time and time again that he's got the strength and fortitude to be able to make it through the campaign and then a 4-year term. So that's going to be a long, long road for him. It's obviously only gotten harder in many ways, and we still will have to wrestle with over the next couple of weeks the continuing questions about whether or not he needs to be replaced on the ticket. Democrats may find that that's a particularly attractive, even more attractive idea as they try to desperately figure out how to change the narrative after this assassination attempt. But it also could just leave Biden even more dug in on him being the best one place to beat Trump.
So in our last 30 seconds, Kevin, what's the one thing you're going to be looking for most closely as attention turns to Milwaukee this week?
Well, I do think it's going to be what Donald Trump's new tone is. Should he adopt it? And how long does it last after the convention when the spotlight is slightly moved on?
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Today, your morning brief on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed at 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, and Bloomberg 960 in San Francisco.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, Sirius XM, the iHeartRadio app, and on Bloomberg.com. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.